Welcome in, listeners. This is Margin Mavens, a podcast hosted by Steph and Kayla, where we share our thoughts on all things literature. Today, we are joined by Morgan B. Lee, author of the Cursed Legacies series that follows Maven as we uncover her secrets, meet the love interests, and where the world building keeps on getting better and better. If you have not watched the earlier episodes, those will be linked somewhere on the screen. The content for today's talk will contain talks of death, drugs, kink, graphic violence, mentions of childhood abuse, and torture. Please take care of yourselves and only listen if such topics do not make you uncomfortable. Now make sure to grab a snack and a drink. Unless you're driving, then remember 10 and 2 and come hang out with us while we dive in. So, Morgan,
First of all,
first of all,
how dare?
how dare you? How dare you?
How
And,
dare?
okay. We're going to back it up a little first, though. Just know that that was the first thing we both wrote down in our questions for you.
Yeah, we're like,
Was
okay, questions. Both of us
immediate.
simultaneously in stereo. How dare?
How
That is
dare
valid.
you?
That's valid.
So, yeah. So first and foremost, right? One thing that I immediately wanted to know is like Maven is not like other FMCs, right?
Mhm.
For a majority of reasons, but a lot of the fact being that she's into the macabre, she's into death, she's into, the dark and dreary, right? And she does it in a way that's not like poster child for teen angst like some other FMCs do it, it's what she loves. It's you can see it in every aspect of her. Was that something you knew all along? Like what was the driving force behind creating a character like Maven?
Um, I'm really glad you asked me that. So, I have been developing Maven's character for years before I decided I would write it in this setting and with these other characters. I've always loved main characters or just girl characters who just are more in touch with their morbid side. I mean, like there's so many characters that exemplify that on TV. For example, like I don't know if you watched Parks and Recreation, but April Ludgate is my favorite. And then anything like with that character type, like I don't know, Rosa Diaz in Parks and Recreation in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Like there's just a bunch of ones where whenever I see that character archetype come up, I'm just like, I love it. I feel like it needs to be presented more. And also, some characters are meant to be more. I don't want to say so. Just they're meant to be more afraid of the emotional aspects of things. And so I feel like there's a lot of room for characters like Maven, where I just feel like it's a character type that I love to see and I don't see it enough.
Yeah, I
Feelings are
mean,
scary.
feelings are incredibly scary, and the fact that she simultaneously is feeling the feelings but hates the fact that she's feeling the feelings is really good. I think we see a lot of
Relatable.
that in this one. Yeah, we definitely see a lot of that in this one. Got a list. Hold on, guys.
Of course you do.
Okay, so what was you talked about how you had been creating this character of Maven for a while before deciding to push her into this setting. What was the kind of driving force into getting you to do this story, this setting, these characters?
Um, when I officially started writing it or when I was just brainstorming it, because that was since probably 2022 or 21 that I've really been brainstorming the Cursed Legacy series and the different moving parts and the different personalities and all of that. But when I really decided to really go for it was actually it was probably December of 2023. It was a pretty quick process.
That's crazy.
That is
Built
wild.
different. She's built different, guys. Um, what does your writing process look like from the brainstorming to final product in the hands of your reader?
Just picture the most ADHD writing process you can think of. That's pretty much it. So
There's no
I
process.
Yeah, it's a whole process of I get so many ideas all the time, so I keep them in a notebook and I write them down. I'll be in the middle of doing anything and I'll just stop and write it down because I will forget. And then slowly it accumulates and it builds on itself and eventually I'm like, well, this has to go in a story and then it gets put in a story. And then when I'm actually writing, I do great with I guess, hyperfixating on whatever I'm writing. And so I will really block out a time of a month or two where I really like dive in and I write like crazy, because if I'm not immersed enough in the story, or I just kind of pick at it and nibble at it and I'm not actually writing it, then it's not going to get done in the time that I want it to get done, or I'll just kind of get distracted or anything like that. And so anyway, I like to have it all baking in my head for a while, and then I sit down and I just write it all down pretty damn fast. And then I I just go through the process of having it edited and different. I have some really amazing beta readers and then ARC readers, and a lot of them will help me if there's anything that is missed by me or my editor. It's honestly just an amazing process.
We love the mental health girlies are really here, and they all shine in this episode. So one of the things that I sold the book, right, when I was talking Kayla into looking into the series and everything, because I had stumbled upon this one, as I think many of your readers did, through a TikTok video. And I was like, man, yeah, I think I had just started getting into the why choose era of my reading, and now it's consumed my soul.
Yes,
But
as it does.
one
Yes.
of the first things that stuck out to me was the fact that the characters aren't 16, 17, 18 years old. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Mhm.
there's a place for the kind of like academy setting why chooses where everyone's around 18, 19. But what I really love is the fact that these ones they're older, their whole way of being, you can tell, is they just carry themselves a lot older, so that's been really cool. But one of the things I really sold the book on was the fact that all of the relationships, right? They're all thought out, and they don't just go like, "Oh, we all like Maven and therefore that's why we're here." They all each have something to give to the story. What did that look like for you when planning that out? Did you have to change a character a bunch of times? Did you go like, "Oh, you were going to be this way, but now you're this way?"
I don't know that I change the characters so much as they change themselves. They're so bossy in my head. I'm not crazy, I promise. But I did think about, Maven's personality type. It is fun to have her with somebody who's more of a golden retriever, because that's a naturally a dynamic that you do see quite a
Mhm.
lot, actually. And then also kind of more of the, shy Everett, and that's also a dynamic I feel like I see quite a lot of. And so I did think about the different dynamics at play and how that would feed into how their individual relationships would look with Maven. But no, for the most part, when I really started writing it, it was like I had pretty different ideas of how the characters would be, or at least their backstories. And just as I was writing, it was like, just kidding, nope, it's gonna be whatever they say. And so,
I am but the vessel.
yeah, I
Yeah,
am but the vessel, and they
really.
are so bossy. So,
Oh, but it works out because we love them.
It does.
I
okay.
know that Kayla has a few questions, so instead of
I
hogging
do.
all of your time, I'm gonna
Thanks.
bounce back
Thanks.
over to her.
What's your favorite part about writing this series in particular?
My favorite part of this series, I think that it's probably the more macabre, dark aspects that I get to kind of explore with each character, because each of these characters is very flawed or broken,
Love it.
And
Hmm.
yeah, that's really when you identify with a character or you like them, it's not because of their strengths, it's because of their weaknesses. And so with this one, I've just had so much fun with it because, yeah, obviously they all have different things going on that makes it really difficult for them. So yeah, I guess my favorite part has been exploring the different struggles that each of the individual characters have, and then also just putting them all through hell, kind of, which sounds terrible, but
Yeah.
when you do
Yeah.
that,
Repeatedly.
A little bit.
yeah,
Repeatedly.
it sounds pretty sadistic, but characters grow the
Every
most.
other chapter.
Yeah,
Stressing
I would
us
say I'm
out.
sorry, but it's genuinely just too fun for that. So it really
That's
helps the
fair.
characters develop, and so that's more fun for me, and I think for readers when you see the way they start and then when they end and all of that, and so
Your dialogue is
Chef's
hands
kiss.
down my favorite.
Oh,
Yes.
it's so good.
Are you drawing inspiration from anywhere in particular, or is this all just you being the vessel and they're literally arguing on the page for you?
specifically with dialogue, no, that come like I'll just get ideas for very specific phrases or like instances that I think are hilarious, that But no, the scene when they're in the diner, there's a lot of different conversations that go on in there that are they were hilarious, right? They were just fun. And most of those came to me as just individual ideas that I had to sit and write down. I have a document that's probably, honestly, 30,000 words long. That's just notes. And it's not like written out at all. It's just, hey, this phrase is hilarious. Put it in there somewhere. And so I get to find these little pieces of dialogue that I'm like, this is absolutely something that she would say or they would say. And then I just put them where I feel like that makes sense.
Maven with the potatoes.
Yeah,
It's a good
Maven with the
scene.
potatoes.
Oh, it's a good scene.
Do you ever just like, because when I'm reading it, sometimes I stop and I scream because I'm like, something is going on or somebody says something. Do you ever have to like stop while you're writing and just sort of like stand up and walk away and maybe stare at a wall for a minute because you're like, I can't believe I just wrote that?
I think if I know I've written a good scene, I just get really excited and I get the zoomies like a cat, but I don't think I sit there like and think about it too long. I just get really hyper and then I write more. So,
Yeah, I think I take 3 to 5 business days mentally
Yeah,
to
at
really deal
least,
with some
at
things, you
least
know? Like,
lay on the floor face down.
'cause it's all the scene that's the other really cool part about your books is a lot of Why Choose books, I think, fall into this rhythm of, like, every other page has to be something, like, smutty or spicy. And what I really liked about your series the entire time, right, is that the smut is there, it's well written, but it doesn't take away from the plot. Like, at no
Right.
point was I like, "Oh, there's this really important thing happening, and now they're boning," you know? Like, it was always like everything made sense for the
I
scenario that they were in.
I am happy to hear you say that. I think that within the Why Choose community, it's pretty common for readers to not like slow burns, which is totally, that I respect that. That's fine. I like when it gets spicy right away as well. But um, with certain characters, yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it was really important to me that Maven have this aversion to touch at the beginning and how she like slowly adjusts with that and everything. And so really like it could not happen quickly. And
Right.
Mhm.
now that with her character naturally, then it becomes she has to explore what she does and doesn't like, or
Mhm.
just that whole because she's never had that before. And then there's with four different guys, it's kind of a lot to explore. And so I
Yeah.
tried to pace it in the most organic way possible, but it kind of did that by itself.
Yeah, I like that they all 4 of them, like we were talking about with their individual ideas and stuff, they have obviously because of the dynamics of a wide choose and stuff, they all 4 of them have that innate drive to make Maven happy in those scenarios. But I like that all 4 of them have their own kind of
Backstory and
kink,
history.
they have their own way of sleeping, they have their own way of doing things to bring themselves pleasure and to bring their partner pleasure, and it's really funny to watch all 4 of them kinda interacting. Ugh, I know Kayla has more questions, and I'm a yapper, so I'm gonna keep giving it to
Yeah.
Kayla until
Um,
she tells me otherwise.
we're gonna get into sort of like what I think are silly questions, but are very, very important. Who is your favorite character?
My favorite character, oh man, that's hard.
Yeah.
It probably is Maven. She's just so much fun to write. But if I had to pick, I mean, if I had to pick between one of the guys, like the most fun general to write,
Yeah.
who's my favorite to write, it's between Crypt and Everett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crypt, it's a pleasure because I get to make him very kind of poetic and very dark poetic, which is
Mhm.
right up my alley. And then with Everett, I get to make him really awkward. This kind of mix of like he's self-conscious, but he's like, he's kind of an upright dude, but sometimes he's really not. And so it's a whole dynamic that I get to explore with him. He's kind of a nuanced
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
I love Everett and how stressed out he constantly is because they're always
Especially
talking
in this book.
badly about everything that he thinks is important, and he's like, "Oh, they're gonna smite us. We're gonna die to
Yeah.
smiting," and that's what's gonna happen.
Yep.
I'm so glad that you said Crypt. He's been my favorite since the beginning, and every time I go into a new book in the series, I'm like, "Oh, is this the one where, like, so and so finally takes, like, 1st place?" Or, "This person has been, like, getting closer and closer to being my favorite." And I think my favorite is like a really big tie between Crypt. I say tie, but it's not really that close. But Crypt and then like Silas. I love Silas so much. and I can't get enough of him, and the fact that he is kind of the first one to be like, "Oh, this is like him and Crypt were kind of the first ones to be like, "Oh, she's like dark, dark."
Yeah.
And then being like, "That's cool. Kind of scary, but it's cool." um
Yes.
and I love him so much. What else, Kayla? Don't get
I
me
have
yapping
I
again.
have I have another very important question I just thought of. Okay. Again,
Okay.
silly but important. If you had to fan cast the boys, who
Oh
would
no,
you
don't
fan cast
ask
them?
me this.
I
Oh.
need to
I
know.
started getting hives for you.
Yeah, okay. See, this is my trouble is like I swear I've talked to like character artists and I've tried to describe how I want the characters to look and so help me I cannot. I don't know what it is, but there's certain people who I've thought of who kind of look like what I would want them to look like in my head.
Mhm.
The biggest trouble with it is that characters are just going to look different in everybody's heads. And so I feel like no matter who I say for casting, it's just not going to make sense. Let me
Yeah,
see if I can
someone's gonna be
find.
upset.
Yeah,
But it's the
someone's going to be upset.
personality. Like, it's
Yeah.
not so much the looks for me. It's like, who do you think could handle like Crip's personality? Like, who do you think could really like nail that chef's kiss, no notes? And that's hard because it's Crypt. Like,
Oh, I love him.
I mean, I feel like it's really stereotypical, but if I say like a young Ian Somerhalder, is that allowed? Because I
amen.
adore
Amen.
him.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
There are gods among
Yes.
us.
I couldn't imagine like anybody else really, but
Yeah, I it's a struggle with Crypt because honestly, yeah, he just has to be maybe I
I
can
think all of
picture
them are very like personality
they're very
heavy.
base.
personality heavy, yes, and I actually try not to over describe characters because I would like people to be able to imagine them how they would like, and that surprised me
Mhm.
sometimes. I had no idea the amount of people who pictured Balefire with long hair until
Mhm.
and I just had comments about it, and I guess I just never went to
Now I
just
can
like
unsee it.
Yep.
yeah, right,
But
right, now I
see, like
picture him with a man bun.
I pictured Balefire as black. So like in my head, his long hair is locks.
Okay. See, no, I don't over-describe the characters because I want people to be able to picture them how they
Yeah.
want. And I did give, like, general descriptions, I think, in the first book, and now and
With
then
like
I'll kinda
shape
throw
and
in a
stuff. Yeah.
reminder. Yeah, but
Mhm.
I really would prefer and that's why it's so hard to be like, "Oh, I would want the specific person to play them," because they could be a lot of
Right.
people who could play them, and
Yeah.
I'm not very good at listing actors.
Yeah, I also think like I have a really hard time visualizing characters when I'm reading. Like unless the author gives it to me very like methodically of like this is how they look or what their hair is like or whatever. I end up just focusing so much more on personality. So I've actually really enjoyed the fact that we don't get a lot of details about specific things that they have or, what they look like because then I can kind of just adapt it as the mood hits.
I have more, but I don't know like if we're ready to dive into
Oh, we're
spoilers.
not. We're not.
Okay,
We're
we're
not.
not. You first then, my
Well,
darling.
okay. I'm mostly curious because I always love finding other why choose books and stuff. What are some like pet peeves that you have within this genre?
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, I have a lot of beef with the main character that's supposed to be the really strong, I guess, sassy main character, but she just comes across as like a mean pick me girl. I have a really hard time
Amen.
with and I
Yeah.
think that those really strong, like sassy, like that can come across so well if it's written well. And a lot of the time, I guess it doesn't put me off enough that I won't read the book if the main character has that kind of energy. But there's been times when I start it and it's like, I don't know, she'll talk up how, you know, how she is and how she's a badass and all this stuff, and then you never actually really see it, but you hear a lot about how much she
Yep.
suffered or different things. It's just very hard for me because I don't know, I feel like if you don't have to you don't have to talk about it so much. So
Mhm.
that's one pet peeve, and I think another one, I think you guys kind of touched on it, but whenever the guys don't really have distinctive personalities, I just kind of
Bandit.
just yeah, I'm not a fan of that. And then I don't like the Virgin FMC trope, where it's like all the guys
Yeah.
are these players and they're with ladies all the time, and then the main character is like, I don't know. I don't enjoy that trope as much.
I definitely think that's another thing that's interesting about it is that obviously Maven has her history, right? It's a very different
Mhm.
type of history because of the, circumstances and stuff behind it. We're still in the spoiler-free section, listeners. So
You're
I'm
welcome.
being vague. That's why. But what I really do like is that all of the men, apart from one of them, sorry, having to remind myself to be vague, have their own histories, right? And what I really like about it is you get a specific scene in Twisted Soul that's so fun because one of them is like, "Man, I really hate that any of this happened before her." And I'm like, that's you love to see it because a lot of the
Yeah.
times you'll get a lot of male love interests and they'll be like, "Oh, none of them mattered before you," but they don't like their actions don't show it. They just kind of end up saying it, but you as the reader are like, I don't believe you, right? Like you still like did
Right.
all these things. And these are the first male characters that you have where you're really like, oh yeah, like they literally could not care less about
They would
anybody.
erase their memories
Yeah.
if somebody gave them the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They love
That's so
that.
fun. It's so fun. Do you have authors that you adore within this genre that like immediately if somebody came to you and was like, I'm brand new to the wide shoes genre, who do you recommend? What are the names that you give them?
Oh man, that's also a good question. I'm a huge fan
I
of
work
Raven
hard on these
Kennedy.
guys.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a big fan of Raven Kennedy. Anything she's written, whether it's, you know what, let me just pull up my book list. I can give you a long list of authors.
Take notes, get your pen and paper,
Yeah, I
peeps.
will. Don't even worry. Sends a message to my editor when she starts talking names.
Write them down.
I'm
Yeah,
also
take
I'm
your
also
time.
a big fan of Jay Bree. I can list that one off the top of my head.
Oh my god.
I
I just read her
the Bonds That Tie series. That was
yeah.
called yes.
Oh,
I
that was Kayla. That was the sixth one that I read in like 4 days.
Oh,
Devoured it, ate it
yeah.
up. Uh,
Yeah.
so good.
yeah, Jay Bree
So
knows
good.
what's up. She knows what she's doing.
She
I
knows. God.
She's done yeah, she did phenomenally with that series. Um, and then I love everything I have written by Christy Cunning. In particular, my favorite one was the Gypsy Blood series. I think it's called All the Pretty Monsters.
Mhm.
Oh.
And so I loved that one quite a lot. Anything by Jamin Eve I've read. And I'm trying to think of other ones that I just like adored.
As an author, do you get to read often or is it something that like you don't really get to do anymore?
I go I go through phases where I'm either reading everything I can get my hands on or I don't read at all. And it'll go for like months at a time like that. And I don't know why that's the case, but I will sit down and I'll read probably 4 or 5 series back to back. And I'll just like be so excited about these series. And then one day it's like, no, I do not feel like reading. And that'll last for also just weeks at a time. And so I
Yep.
do get to read a lot when I set aside the time. But otherwise, and recently I've been really busy, so I have not.
That
Get it. We
happens
get it. All right. Are
100%.
we ready for the
Yes.
spoiler section of this conversation?
I've been
Yes.
ready.
Bring
Because
on the
yeah,
spoilers.
we've been gearing, we've been rearing. Listeners, loves, if you have not read any of the books, but specifically Twisted Soul, the third one, this is your only warning. I will have no sympathy for you past this
We've
point.
given you 20 solid minutes of spoiler-free content. You're
We
done.
held back. This is for us now.
This is for us. I was gonna say the same thing. This is for us. This is not for you anymore.
Okay, my first question immediately. I don't know if Kayla can guess what my first question is. Why did they gain their bonds with Maven in the order that they did? Was there a reason behind it? Did I miss a memo and it was obvious?
It's not obvious, but I don't think.
Oh,
Well, I feel like it might be a spoiler for the fourth, but I don't know if it's a spoiler
that's
per
fair.
se.
I respect it.
Um,
I'm pouting, listeners, but I respect it.
I mean, if you read the very end, you probably have a small guess as to how it could have happened. But I'll tell
Mhm.
you that it wasn't the gods doing it.
Okay,
So
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Go, Kayla. We'll switch off. You'll do one. I'll do
Okay.
one.
Uh, no, because now you put me on the spot. I can't remember what my question was. You go. You go.
Okay.
Don't pursue me.
Did you always know that this series was going to be 4 books? Because it's finished after the fourth, right? The fourth is the finale.
yes, I did.
Ugh. What was something that you had to kind of take into account when doing that? Because like the third one was the first one that really ended on like a oh my god
God,
cliffhanger. You know, the
cliffhanger.
first
Yeah.
one,
Right.
no pun intended. The first one, right, ends with the cliffhanger of
What
stupid
now?
face being dead and she wasn't the one that did it.
Right.
Um but it wasn't, I mean, the second book wasn't out yet, right? And so I remember reading the first one and being like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that happened. Like, can't wait for the next one." But I didn't have such a like I'm gnawing at the prison bars you've put me in experience until this
Hence
third
the
one.
how
Yeah.
dare.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
thank
how
you for
dare
saying that.
we're circling back.
I think everybody gauges cliffhangers differently, and I really did not think the first 2 books were that bad at all. I thought it was
No.
like, that's the proper stopping point, that's where it stops.
Yeah,
And
it
with
was
the third
good.
No,
one,
they're fine.
I really tried to emphasize this one is an actual cliffhanger because it is compared to the first 2, so
I
Yeah,
thought you were kidding. I was
you
like,
even put it at the
oh,
beginning.
it's probably not that bad. The first 2 weren't that bad. It's okay. And then I
Yeah.
finished and I was like,
Yeah, she wasn't kidding.
okay, okay,
And I feel for Kayla
okay.
because I hadn't even started it.
No.
So like we've talked about, I had been waiting for this third one for a while, right? And so when I got Kayla interested in the stories, the first 2 had been out, but the third one wasn't out yet. And so she read them, and then I was like, okay. And she immediately wanted to pick up the third one, and I was like, you cannot do this. We are waiting until it gets closer to the interview and stuff like that. And I was like fiending a little bit, and then finally she was like, okay, I need you to read this book, like now. And so I've finally sat down, read it, and immediately texted her upon finishing it, going, "Oh yeah, no, I finished it. How dare, how
How
dare she
dare.
do that to me?" Um, but okay, so a lot obviously happens in this book. We find out that there are, well, we always knew that there were gods in play, right? Especially with
Right.
Everett being the way that Everett is. One of the things that I really love about this one is they start figuring out what's going on with their curses, right? They're
right.
like,
Yeah.
something is going on. The whole thing with our curses has always been that, you know, finding our keeper and bonding and everything is going to get rid of our curses. And then we have the third book ending in Silas becoming a necromancer. You're right. Second book. Sorry, brain go everywhere.
Yes.
Um Second book ends with Silas becoming a necromancer, and I was already like, how dare you? But I was like, no, I trust Morgan. She wouldn't let him die. You know, she wouldn't do that to me. And then we started the third book, right? And we find out that he has become some sort of hybrid caster, right? And I love how pragmatic Maven is when it comes to it because he's like, I still want your blood and I'm having a moral crisis about it. And she's like, nah, homie, just try it.
Tap it. Let's go.
I love how she's like, you can't kill me. So worst is gonna happen is this is awkward for a second. Like, um, but so we find out a lot. We find out that his, you know, curse is lifted, but he becomes a hybrid caster. We find out more about his mentor, and his sanctuary and stuff, which first off, I don't remember the guy's name, but the acolyte that was immediately upon learning some news about Maven that we don't fully get until the end,
He's a-
just ride or
I
die
stand
Maven.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just,
He was
yep.
great. I'm so sorry he had to lose a hand temporarily. I respect it though. I literally underlined it and went, yeah, no, this is a crypt move. I get it.
Yep. Yes.
um, and so then I'm kind of just walking the listeners through the book for a second, but we kind of start one of my favorite interactions that I don't think I paid enough attention to as I was reading this book because I was obviously just trying to like devour this thing was all of her interactions with that specific bounty hunter were so funny and good in the fact that she was excited because she was like, "Man, he's the first one in a while I've fought that's actually hard." Like
Oh,
he's
yeah.
actually
So
like
good.
he's like, you've kind of left me alive a couple times now. Like, are you just like a sadist?" And she's like, "No. I just like the fact that you're actually hard to fight." That was super fun.
The fact that she craves the violence is what
Yeah.
really just,
The
like,
inner monologues of like, "Oh my god, I'm about to fight. I'm gonna walk
yeah,
into a fight now."
"Gonna go get bloody, let's go."
Um, and then it, like, stresses her guys out is really good for me. Like, at very early on when they're trying to leave the academy and everything, right? All of the men are obviously getting ready to get out, and they're like, "Okay, we get it. You wanna be there, like, you're super capable. We love you. You're strong and independent, but you're really stressing us out when you go out there. So could we, like, avoid the fighting?" And she's like, "No, dog. That's a no from me." The fact that these men don't have, like, aneurysms or like heart palpitations more often is crazy to me because their whole being is like keep her safe and her whole being is I want to kill everything and be everywhere. Um
It
It's
also
such a fun
becomes
dynamic.
she wants to keep them safe too.
yeah, it's a battle. We meet Bellfire's mom, who
Who
she's
is
dope.
amazing.
Love her.
Yes.
I ugh, love
What was
her.
it like writing her?
Ugh,
I was so excited when I got to the part about writing Balefai's family because, I don't know, you can tell a lot about a person. I mean, about a person by the way that they treat. They say like with men specifically, the way they treat their mothers and
Yes.
sisters and all of that. And with Balefire, I liked to give a little bit of context that he's used to being around really strong women. His mom
Yeah.
was always meant to be really strong, and obviously, she's a general, she's very militant, so you get a little bit of a
mhm,
glimpse into Balefire's background where people consider him being just very, spoiled and like this miracle child that everybody knows about and blah blah blah. But he has like a very down to earth mom, and honestly,
mhm.
the most normal family compared to any of the others. So I just had
Truly.
so much fun writing that.
Really.
Yeah, I
He's like,
needed
"This
at
is what
least
a family does."
yes. Exactly. No, I had a lot of fun writing Bridget's character a lot. So
Uh, I
Speaking of families, hold on, Steph. Pump your brakes for a second.
pumping.
How dare you
Ooh.
do my boy Everett dirty like that? That poor boy. I have met. There are very few times I want to crawl into a book and like physically hurt somebody, but I want to physically strangle Everett's entire family at this
Mhm,
point.
mhm.
What
yes.
was like, was that intentional or was it something that just sort of like happened? You're like, oh, that's a really good idea. Let me do that.
No, that was intentional. Yeah. I
Mm,
had planned in the beginning for him to have actually when I started brainstorming the series, he was going to have a different curse entirely. And if you ask me now, I can't remember what it was because as I was writing it, I was like, no, it absolutely has to be that he doesn't even really know what's going on. And it's his family's fault because his family,
are the
um,
moist.
they are the
Yeah.
worst, and they will, yes, you do meet them more in the fourth book, and it's not a joy. And so,
I
anyway,
hope Maven punches him at the throat.
No,
it's
I hope one of the others just like
Oh yeah,
wrecks
because
them.
that's something that we get a lot in this book. Is obviously we find out in the first one that none of the men like each other, right? They're not even really on like civil basis with each other. And then second book happens and you start figuring out like we find out Crypt and Balefire's whole shtick, right? And we find out why Crypt did the things he did and all of those things. And then in this one, right, we find out that Everett is the reason that Silas was became a acolyte under the wizard man. Um And we find out that they've all, even before Maven, right, were all kind of intricately involved in each other's well-being while still being
Mhm.
like, I hate this guy's guts.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I really love about them is that they're very like, oh, I think Balefire is the only one that's like, yeah, these are kind of my dogs now, you know? Like,
Yeah.
these are my homies. The rest of them are like, I can't fucking stand a single other person in this quintet other than Maven. Crypt goes on this whole thing with Balefire when he's going through his rutting thing, being like, I thought up of all the ways of use of leather. And I'm like, dude, these are people you're gonna spend the rest of your life with. Um, and having them have that sort of jealousy amongst each other, especially with the bonding situation where Silas and Maven were able to talk in each other's brains, and Crypt was very much like, cut that out or I'm breaking your skull.
Yeah.
I love him, Your Honor. Could never love a man more. And that was so this book was just a treat, right? So we find out, it's kind of hinted throughout the book, that Maven is connected to the man that we learn about in the first book, right? And so
Was
knowing
it
all
the
these
first book
things,
or the second book? I don't remember.
I think it was the first one. Morgan, fact check us. when
Wait.
we when we get that case where they execute
Oh,
Amato?
Amato,
Amato. Yes, her father, yes.
first book.
That
Second
is
book.
in the beginning of the second book. It's Everett's prologue.
My bad, y'all.
No, you're good. You're good.
Now knowing everything, I'm gonna have to reread the series again. You know, a super big sacrifice on my end. I'm doing that
Oh, so
for you guys.
sacrifice. So
Um,
hard.
but so we find out that, that was her actual father. We find out that there's other things in play here. It starts getting hinted pretty early on when they go to the wizard's sanctuary and stuff that she might have been chosen by the gods, right, to be a saint at birth, which then brings in like this whole moral conundrum thing because she ends up being turned into the revenant and then she's now the tellum and she craves death and destruction and stuff, right? So the entire time this is happening, I'm like, wow, that's gonna be kind of awkward if everyone around her is super saintly and pristine. And she's like, so when are we gutting people? And then we find out, at the very end who her mother is,
Mhm.
right? I love what you did in this book. I know we've just been praising you for a while now, but I love what you do in this book and the fact that Silas doesn't show fear very often, but he shows genuine, raw, unadulterated fear every single time this goddess comes near him.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I can't wait if there is ever a scene
Meet the
of like
mom.
the meet the mom is such a good
So this
thing.
mom
If
and
it's
Silas
not
is
in
just
Yeah, if this is not already in the 4th book, I need it to be an extended scene. I will sell whatever you need. I will do whatever you want.
Oh no,
Uh,
it'll be fun. Don't you worry.
nice, nice. But so we find out all of these things, right? And what was kind of like your thought process in those final scenes where Maven believes that she's kicking the bucket for realsies, right?
Mhm.
And she's telling Everett like, "Hey, watch out for them."
and did you s did you specifically choose Everett to be there for a reason, or was that, like, did you just roll a D4 and it's, like, one of these numbers assigned to
Oh
one of
no,
these boys?
that was 1000% intentional. It has to
Oh,
do with the
Yeah.
dynamic of the guys actually more than with Maven. I mean, I wanted to repeat. Actually, I knew they would have that conversation. I wrote that scene before I finished writing Shadowheart. Um, and so that conversation that they
Oh,
have, I specifically echoed, Everett talking to Maven when they're at the dance in Shadowheart because I wanted it to be a callback. And
yeah,
so I
I got
definitely
it.
picked him. Wait, what was that?
It was a
I,
good callback.
oh, thank
Appreciate
you. It didn't hurt anyone at all. Okay, it was
it.
beautiful.
Yeah.
No, I it had to be Everett for a few reasons. And so anyway, it's more obvious in the fourth book, but he's definitely supposed to be the character who changes the most. And so anyway,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Sure, for sure.
mhm.
I see what you're putting down. I'd like you to pick it back up, but I see what you're putting down.
I like to go back and erase my memory of the last minute, please. I don't
um,
want to know that.
another kudos for you is there's not a lot of authors, and we talk about this in another episode about your books. I can't remember if it's the first or second, so please don't quote me on it. But there's not a lot of authors that you can find that they'll write equally good violent scenes and equally good like spicy scenes.
Yeah, it's usually one or
And
the other.
and it's usually one or the other. And the fact that all of the scenes as a whole are pretty interesting is so telling kind of like of how much time and dedication goes into writing these books. Because the fact that I can go from reading Maven like gouging somebody's eyes out,
Ripping a
right? And
heart
being
out
like,
and
this is
then
cool. She's pretty girly pop,
going
right?
for a
And
ride.
then immediately going for a ride.
We love a multifaceted queen, okay?
I can't believe you just said that on Beyonce's internet.
Oh my gosh.
Am I wrong? You're gonna look at me,
Oh.
you're gonna tell me that I'm wrong?
No,
What
you
okay. What was the kind of like editing process of the like spicier scenes? Like were there things what thought process went behind kind of like the kinks that you put in it, right? So we see a lot of somnophilia in this one. Um and what was your brain doing? I'm just curious because there's not often you get to ask a like romance writer like, "Hey, yo, what were you thinking about? How did this work? What are the logistics like?"
Right. The logistics are the hardest part. I have to remember where they are and what's where and what's going on.
Angles,
Um,
guys, angles.
yeah,
Yeah.
angles, I hate them. Anyway, they try like, I want something to happen, then I'm like, "That is physically impossible." Anyway, um,
Maven would die trying.
she would die trying. She is up for anything. She's meant to be more explorative now that she's, able to be more exploring, and so
Yeah.
that's really her thing is that she obviously is a little bit more dominant, which I don't feel like there's enough of the girl
Not
being more
enough.
dominant. It's
Ugh,
something that drives me a little bit crazy. I mean, I don't dislike when I read a book and the guys are more, growly and possessive and very dominant. That's fine, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more variety. And so anyway,
There's something to be said about a growly man like Silas and Crypt being more submissive. Like there's just
yeah.
or like a
The
big
fact
guy
that,
like
like
Balefire.
yeah,
Walk
the
him
fact
like
that,
a
like
dog, sis, please.
the fact that, like, all of these men and, like, Everett in his own way too, because obviously he's a lot more awkward than the rest of them, but I like the fact that you walk into those, like, spicy scenes with Everett expecting him to kinda, like, fumble and be awkward and everything, but once he, like, sets his mind to the fact that, like, this is happening, he's like, "We're gonna figure out whether this curse is gonna actually do anything to her or whatever."
yes.
Um, like, he's great. Even the scene where, like, they all say something at the same time and Crypt is like, "I'm gonna shoot myself now." Like, he pantomimes shooting himself. I'm like, "These are good." Like, we are in, like, a tense, serious scene, and it made me cackle. And I was like, "Yes, this is the balance that we need. I can't be stressed out for 400 pages, you know? I need to have some balance in here." Um, no, I love Crypt a lot. We don't get an answer in this book. I was just realizing about the fact that once Crypt and her are bonded, he like gets called to limbo less and less. Ma'am,
As in he
like he
is
had all the
heavily
markings, right? He's got all the markings, and they were like constantly lighting up, would cause him a lot of pain, and it gets to the point after they're bonded where he like people are mentioning that he's still lighting up, but it's like dimmer. He's not really reacting. He's like ignoring it now. I've got
Yes.
questions.
So that, um, it really I don't want it to be read into too much, but really what it is each one of them is supposed to be stronger after they've bonded. So he's
Mhm.
just more equipped to deal with it, even
Gotcha. So
though
he's, like, no longer
yes,
agonizing, more
he's not in
annoying.
as much pain. His curse can't be broken, so it's not quite the same as the others, but him being
Yeah.
stronger, you know.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yep, you're
So,
welcome.
what caused you want to hurt.
Why do you hate Steph so much that you would make her favorite character have a curse that can't be broken? Is what she wants to ask.
What would make you? What did I do before you even met me to make it to where my favorite character has an expiration date?
Stephanie, you can't do that.
He's got one. He's got one. Another thing he has in common with Maven is the fact that they're both like expiring, you know? Like, why'd you do that?
I just, you know, some men just love to watch the world burn, but I'm a lady who likes it, so I don't know. I genuinely really thought out Crypt's situation. So don't panic too much because there will be a lot going on in the fourth book.
Because we were told this ends in a happily ever after.
It ends in a happily ever after, I promise.
Yeah, I think that's one of the saving graces of like why chooses, I think. Or like romance, I think in general, is it's kind of the rule of thumb that even if it's not a standalone, but it's a series or something that like the characters end up in some semblance of a happy ever after. There's certain authors that I have beef with because they step into the romance genre and decide that that is not the way they want to live their lives. I'm not going to out them. That's not what this podcast is for. But
You
just
can out them
know,
later.
just know that when I read a romance book, right, and one that is marketed as like just solely romance, right, fantasies and stuff are obviously, you know, their own being. But when it's just a high and dry romance, right, and you read it or you read the series and you're like, you're telling me this was all for naught. I'm very happy that I trust you enough despite the pain you've caused me.
I'm happy that you trust me too. I no, I've done that. I've read books where I guess I just missed the memo and it ends in a way that I'm like, I'm sorry, that does not constitute
That's
a
not
happily ever
romantic.
after. No. And I like sad stories. Like I'm totally fine if something is super sad or if it's tragic at the end, as long as I know. Like I'm good.
Right.
So we know that the fourth book is coming out. Is that one already packed, sealed?
Oh no.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
I've written a lot of it, and with most of my books, actually, okay, all of my books I've written that are currently published, I write the endings first because it makes more sense to me. I don't know why. And so I'm mostly going to be filling in certain gaps. I write by scene more than like I don't write chapter by chapter. And so there's just places where I need to probably move things around. I need to finish writing. So it's done in the way that like the ending is done, but it's definitely not like signed, sealed, delivered. It's not ready yet.
That terrifies me.
Cool.
Do we have a roundabout idea? Give us
Oh my
a
God.
month. I've been waiting here for 80 years.
For what?
Like, do we have like a month or that you're
Oh,
shooting
yes.
for? Obviously subject to change and stuff, but
It's in April. April 1st is the date. And I know it's April Fool's, and you both gave me the same expression at the same time. And I have to say, I love April Fool's, and I probably will do something, but I wouldn't joke around with the entire book because I probably won't do that.
If
just
you
know
just
know that you
sneak
can
like a devastating scene in just Steph's copy as an April Fool's joke, I would be so excited.
just know that you can now place our faces to our messages, right? And hopefully this experience is going well for you so that if the fourth book hurts me and I tell you I'm sobbing, I need you to remember what I look like and just imagine tears running down my face as it's
Yes,
happening.
I will feel so guilty. I promise.
She's
She's
smiling
laughing.
right now.
She's laughing, listeners. Like,
I love it.
we're being
No,
gaslit.
it will not be that bad. It'll be good.
But there's
Okay.
something to be said about finding an author that you love that absolutely rips your heart into pieces and then puts it back together. Like
Yeah, you just have to remember to put it back together. Right now, it's just strewn everywhere. It's a mess. Okay,
No,
Maeve would be very happy.
Yes, I did this
That's
all
all I
in her
got.
honor. I am deep down a sappy romantic, even though I'm
Nice,
happy to have all
nice.
kinds of, you know, I don't know. I can have a lot of things in my books, but I really can't not do like romance, like genuine happily ever after. So it might look like, I don't know. I think there's some readers who want certain things in the last book that I've already said won't happen. I guess to be more
That's okay.
specific, I don't know if I need to be specific, but there's just certain things that I'm like, that's not the way the story is going to go, but it'll be happy in the end, so
I'm holding you to
Is
it.
yes.
Seth from the
is
future. Send a strongly worded email.
is and I don't want like spoilers. It could be yes or no. Is the possible potential amnesia plot going to be a big one in the last book?
There is, a version of it, but the reason I did it this way, I actually had to go through a crazy amount of edits to incorporate this, by the way, but the reason I did it this way is because I cannot stand just, like, tons of exposition and, like, just chapters worth of information where it's like, you know this is relevant, but for the rest of the book to happen, it's, like, really jarring to just get a lot of this. And so, obviously, you know where Maven ends up at the end of the 3rd book, and there's
Yeah.
a lot that's going to go on and things like that. And so the way that I needed to incorporate it for it to be, um, the best word I have is cinematic. um, I really wanted it to be incorporated throughout the story. And so I usually do not like the amnesia trope. It drives me nuts. But the way that I did it this way is really so that I could drip feed what people need to know in the right places so that
Okay.
nobody
Good
would
way
be
of putting it.
bored out of their mind in the first 2 chapters. So
I'm
Now I
here for
want to
it.
be sedated.
I'm here for it. Bring it on.
Okay, so once this 4th book is out in the world, right? I'm
What's
always
next?
curious. Yeah, I'm always curious with authors. Like, do you already have
Are we
a
getting like a Kenzie spinoff?
So I have already had too many people, I guess, asking me about this, and so I did fess up that I have a separate spin-off that I have planned, and I didn't realize how many people were going to love Kenzie so much. So I
I love
do
Kenzie.
have a novella planned for her, but it will be a short one, but I do have it planned. The other one is just going to be a single book that spins off after the series. And I don't know when that will be done, let alone
following our
Kenzie's. So.
characters? Or
Following following characters that you do know and ones that you're going to meet in the 4th book.
all right, slime.
I hope it's Felix. Anyway.
I have a random question. It just popped into
Yes.
my head because of Kenzie. Does she ever find out that Maven killed one of her quintet's brothers?
Yes. It's a
Solid.
whole conversation that has to happen because, yeah.
I like that
They're
Maven was like,
besties.
crap, wait, I never told you.
Yes.
Yeah, I love their friendship so much and the fact that and like
It's golden
Maven
retriever black
being
cat.
yeah,
It's perfect.
Maven
Yes.
being like a granny when it comes to like technology and obviously not knowing anything when it comes to like different types of food and like her hatred of jello, like she's got all these little things to her that are just so good because it makes a lot of sense. I think some authors will insert tidbits about a character for the sake of making that character interesting, but it won't connect with that character's backstory or like what they've got going on. And so the fact that like Maven never understood like when she had a phone on speaker or even when we're talking about like the spicier scenes, like she didn't understand what edging was and was immediately like, "No, I don't like it." Um Kenzie is so fun and so good for Maven because she immediately was kind of like, "Okay, you're dark. You've got a lot going on. But you kind of need to get your stuff together because your quintet's really freaking hot,
You're
and you're just
mine.
saying
You're my
no.
best friend. You need to
You need to go figure it out."
yeah. And then give
And
me the details after.
yeah, I want to know exactly what was going on here. No, I love her. I
Is
love her so
she like
much.
based off anybody? You have a
So,
best friend
Bestie
in your
like
life?
Kenzie.
oh, do I have an I have when I was a kid. We're not currently, I don't know. We didn't we didn't live in the time when
Life.
we could exchange phone numbers. I don't know where she is
Yeah.
now. But I did have a friend like that. I don't feel like I'm super black catty, but I am more, I guess, that way. And she was like, she just adopted me as an introvert, I suppose. And
Yep.
so I did have that dynamic when I was, yes, I didn't base Kenzie necessarily off of her, but I've always loved that dynamic. And I
Mhm.
did make it very obvious. I've had so many people bring this up, and I'm glad because I love Tim Burton very much. And so I've had a huge amount of people point out the similarities between the TV show Wednesday and my book,
Yeah.
the first one. And I love that. I'm honored. Honestly, the friendship between Kenzie and Maven, I did very specifically tweak it to be more like that because I wanted to pay homage, but also it's just a fun dynamic. I don't think that it's
Mhm.
seen in friendships enough. It's definitely seen in like romantic relationships in books a lot, but I wanted Kenzie to be like a real girl's girl, and I wanted to get it out of the way really quickly that there won't be like that's another we
Drama
talked about
or
pet peeves. Yeah, we
yeah.
talked about some pet
Yeah.
peeves. I have a really hard time when books kind of put down other girls because of the way that I don't know,
Yeah.
they dress or they are, and so with Kenzie, I wanted her to be very, like she is pretty girly, she dresses however she wants to be, and she's open about calling herself a slut and different things like that, and I wanted it to be very established very quickly that she's a very open, happy, bubbly kind of person, and Maven, like, gets along with that. She's not going to be like, "Oh my god, like, how dare"
Yeah.
like, she I wanted it to be clear
Yeah.
that their dynamic could work very well, and it's just been really fun to write them, so
Yeah, I also like that you stayed away from the other really, I think, tiresome trope of meeting like that first female friend and then inevitably that first female friend ends up having like either had a fling with one of the men in the past or had a crush on one of the men or like something, right? That ends up causing that friction between the FMC and her. I like that Kenzie, even like the one scene where she accidentally like saw too much in this book, she was like, definitely wasn't looking. I promise. Don't kill me. I didn't mean it. Oh, and I like that a lot because I think there's this like bad repeating trope of the women have to go through something like some sort of beef within their friendship in order for it to like be
Right.
stronger later. And I just like that they were immediately like, okay, you're different from what I expected, but with time, they become close friends and then
I like that the
Kenzie,
only friction was Maven not keeping in touch and
yeah,
Kenzie having to, like, yell at her for that, like
be like, I thought you were dead.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that was good.
No,
That
that
was
was
good.
just relatable. I have friends who they're like, "Where did you go? Did
ADHD
you drop off the
thing.
earth?" "Yes." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I do exist still. I'm sorry." And so, yes.
But all in all, listeners, this has been another episode of Margin Mavens. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you in the next one. Remember, all links and everything will be in the description down below. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.